Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. I am Jaya Radhe Devi Dasi, and we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, The Cause of All Causes, texts 14 through 17, and I will go through more thoroughly text 16. So, just really quickly say some prayers to our spiritual teachers and get their blessings for a wonderful class. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurulmitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jana Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadatit Swapadantikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripasanubhyavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnav devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Pandit, Srivas Thakur, and all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I pray that Shri Shri Radha Kalachandji, Srila Gurudev, and Srila Prabhupada use me as an instrument so that their message can flow through me to give me the words to serve the Vaishnavas listening. So we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, The Cause of All Causes, text 16. Please repeat. Narayana Paroyogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Please chant. Narayana Parayogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Narayana Parayogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Narayana Parayogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Narayana Parayogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Narayana Paroyogo. Narayana Paramtapa. Narayana Param Jnanam. Narayana Paragati. Please repeat. Narayana para. Just to know Narayana. Yoga. Concentration of mind. Narayana param. Just with an aim to achieve Narayana. Tapa. Austerity. Narayana param. Just to realize a glimpse of Narayana. Jnanam. Culture of transcendental knowledge. Narayana para. Path of salvation ends by entering the kingdom of Narayana. Gati. Progressive path. Who would like to read the translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada? Okay, I think, do we have the mic?
Hare Krishna.
All different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayan. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayan. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayan, and ultimately salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayan.
Purport. Who would like to read?
In meditation, there are two systems of yoga, namely Ashtanga Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is practice concentrating the mind, releasing oneself from all engagements by the regulative processes of meditation, concentration, sitting postures, blocking the movements of the internal circulation of air, etc. Sankhya Yoga is meant to distinguish the truth from ephemerals. But ultimately, both systems are meant for realizing the impersonal Brahman, which is but a partial representation of Narayan, the personality of Godhead. As we have explained before, the impersonal Brahman, effulgence, is only a part of the personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman is situated on the person of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, Brahman is the glorification of the personality of Godhead. This is confirmed both in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Matsya Purana. Gati refers to the ultimate destination, or the last word in liberation. Oneness with the impersonal Brahma Jyoti is not the ultimate liberation. Superior to that is the sublime association of the personality of Godhead in one of the innumerable spiritual planets in the Vaikuntha sky. Therefore, the conclusion is that Narayan, or the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate destination for all kinds of yoga systems, as well as all kinds of liberation.
Thank you. If we can go back to text 14. If somebody wants to read text 14.
The 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof, set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings, are all differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, and in truth there is no other value in them.
15.
The Vedic literatures are made by and meant for the Supreme Lord. The demigods are also meant for serving the Lord as parts of his body. The different planets are also meant for the sake of the Lord, and to please, and different sacrifices are performed just to please him.
16.
All different types of meditation or mystics, or how do you say that? Mysticism are means for realizing Raya and sorry, I don't know how to say that. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayan, cultural transcendental knowledge for getting a glimpse of Narayan, and ultimately salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayan.
And 17.
Inspired by him only, I discover what is already created by him, Narayan, under his vision as the all-pervading supersoul, and I am created by him only.
So we are getting some answers to the questions that Narada Muni had put forward to Brahma at the beginning of this chapter. He'd asked him basically, who gave you the power to create and have all this knowledge? Who gave you all this knowledge? Where does that come from? And so he's really starting to get to the heart of the answer of what this is. Basically, he starts by describing the elements of creation. And when we study the Srimad Bhagavatam, we learn that these elements of creation are just a drop of the power and glory of God, right? It's one part of his whole entire creation is this material world. I think they said, I've read somewhere that's it fits, if you compare the whole universe, it's like the material world of it, the material universe is but a fraction, right? So like the tip of a hair. And then you look at the other spiritual world, it's vast. So he's explaining that what we're here in the material world is just a small portion of his creation, of his glory. In the purport of verse 14, Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 7:4 and 7:5. He says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. Besides these, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploding the resources of this material inferior nature. So we're learning that of everything in the material world, it's just a small part of what there is, and that the ultimate aim for life is realizing and achieving this Narayana. And that everything that we do, the austerities, learning about, learning and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, learning about God, everything is meant for him. He is everything. God is everything. He's saying that the literatures, everything that we read, are meant to understand who Krishna is, who God is, and who we are in relation to him. And so if we look at that, if we look at it this way and we break it down, that the ultimate goal in life is Krishna, right? In Bhagavad Gita, he says, I am the goal. In 9:18, he starts the verse off with, I am the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, etc., etc. So if we look at him as the goal, how does that change the way we interact with our day if we think of everything that we're going to do is meant for Krishna, is meant for God? Will we watch TV if we're thinking in that way? Like, okay, will I, and this is something that I need to remember, right? Because as I've mentioned before, TV watching is my biggest vice. And so, every time I sit down, if I sat down and I said, is this actually meant for Krishna? Or what is this actually, what's the point of this? How will it help me achieve my goal? So if we go through different parts of our day, and especially the main parts of our day, like, okay, granted, after a long day, it's nice to unwind and relax, right? Maybe at that moment, you need to just turn your brain off. But if we spend the majority parts of our day, and we can start small, we can start with saying, maybe for the next hour, let me intentionally, mindfully think about how will this, whatever I'm doing, serve Krishna? How will it help me realize that Krishna is my goal? So what are some things that you do to help you realize that Krishna is your goal? Feel free to share. Yes, you have the microphone?
try to wake up early and just put at the top priority of my day to chant and connect to Krishna.
Thank you. Someone else want to share?
I really try to find the love of Krishna through my brothers and sisters, and really try to sharpen our senses in doing that, and looking people in the eyes and finding the joy that Krishna has given us, and
Very nice.
really trying to uplift that joy in everyone. So
Very nice. It's especially nice because my topic is actually association and how that is so important for helping us achieve our goals. So thank you for giving me a great segue. So I was actually listening to a talk by one of my spiritual teachers, Tamal Krishna Goswami, and he was saying that one of our major goals in Krishna consciousness is to increase our ability to receive mercy, because that's basically why Srila Prabhupada set up this entire movement. He set up the temples so that we can work on our capacity to achieve mercy. And we do that by associating with each other, by associating with those that are a little more advanced in the spiritual path than we are, and learning from them, because through them we gain the mercy. He says, we think, how much mercy can I catch? Actually, Krishna's mercy is unlimited. He goes on to say, Krishna and the Guru Parampara are trying to pour buckets and buckets of mercy, and we're standing there trying to catch it with our thimbles. So the mercy is being poured, and we just have this little tiny thimble that we're trying to catch all this mercy. And when we associate, that thimble becomes maybe like a cup. And when we associate more, it becomes even bigger, and it gives us that ability to really understand what Krishna's teaching us, right? And the biggest thing that we're trying to learn is how to discriminate Krishna from the material energy, from Maya. So what are some ways that we can discriminate Krishna from Maya, the illusory energy, the material energy? Anyone?
one would be to go back to where you found Krishna, because you fell off. Now you got to go back to where you found him. So if you get lost, try to go back to those works.
That's a great point. So when we get lost, right, we have a thing, especially when I was younger, I used to get lost all the time. We had this thing in our family that was like, if you get lost, let's meet at the entrance. Whatever happens, if you lose us, just come to the entrance. And it was inevitable. There was a story of me getting lost at Mardi Gras when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I just found a cop, and I hung out at the cop station all day while my parents worried themselves to death. But I had fun because there was another kid there, and we were playing, and you're 5 or 6, and you're like, oh, my parents will come, right? So there's that innocence of childhood that we can hang on to, right? Because when we're lost, if we have this faith that God will always find us no matter what, we go back to the beginning. You go back to a place that it's open or whatever. So, and then you just kind of hang out because Krishna will come, right? You have that faith deep within. When I was 6 years old, I had no thought that my parents wouldn't come, right? I was just like, okay, how long are they going to take? It wasn't a matter of not coming. It was just when. And so, I'm sure from their point of view, they were terrified. And this was answering machines, cell phones, anything like that. All I knew is I remembered my parents' number, and so I gave it to the cops, and they kept calling every 30 minutes. And then I'm assuming, I can't imagine the terror my parents must have felt by leaving and just going home. At that moment, they may have had some level of defeat and given up. So they went home. And then soon after they got home, they received a phone call from the cops, and they're like, then they immediately drove back, right? So after that, there was this whole thing of whenever you're lost, just go to the entrance and we'll come find you. And it happened not too soon after that. I was at a mall, and the same thing. I got separated, and I was like, oh, I just go to the entrance. So I went to the entrance, and I just sat there and waited. And again, I had that same faith that my parents would find me. At that time, you just don't think of it that way, right? So we want that level of innocence, that level of like just open-heartedness, that no matter what, Krishna will find us. No matter what happens, he will come and rescue us, right? He'll help us by sending us devotees, by sending us these wonderful books to read, by giving instructions in these ways. So as we're learning to discriminate between this material energy and the spiritual energy of what we want, we actually want to, entangle ourselves more in. We have to know what's what. For some people, my spiritual teacher went on to say, like, for some people, some things are, will bring them closer to Krishna, but that same thing will actually bring you to Maya for someone else, right? So we have to be very particular and be open to taking that level of instruction from our spiritual teachers, that just because we see someone else doing something doesn't mean that that is the same thing that we can do or we want to do in order to achieve our goals. For instance, if you have a goal of, wanting to get fit, it just depends on where you're starting from. From someone who's really skinny and they're trying to gain muscle and gain weight, they might do a different regimen, but you're like thinking, oh, I'm also just trying to get fit, right? I also want to gain muscle, but you're on the heavier side, or, and you're trying to lose weight. Doing the same things may not get you there. So we have to really understand what it is that we truly need to achieve this goal of Krishna. So, one of the things that when we talk about goals, especially in the material world, is that sometimes we have a goal. Let's say getting fit is the goal, right? So everything we do is like we concentrate to get fit. However, our goal of Krishna is very different, because to achieve the goal, he is the goal. So when we chant Hare Krishna, what is the goal of chanting Hare Krishna? To keep chanting Hare Krishna, right? So we are doing that. It's the means and the end, right? Like it's not something different. We're not chanting Hare Krishna and then at some point we achieve this level of liberation and we just stop chanting. It's that as we chant, we want to chant more, and we want to chant more and more. And our goal is to get to a point where we can't stop chanting, right? Now it's hard to start, right? It's like so many things when it comes time to start chanting. We want to pick up our beads, and you're like, oh, I need to clean the house. Oh, maybe it's time to make breakfast, or, oh, it's time to go to work already, right? So we have all these things that we can put off chanting because there's still a part of us that is very much attached to the material energy. And we know that when we start chanting, that attachment those strings start to loosen a little bit. And that can be very fearful. That can be, that can create a lot of fear and anxiety within us, because even as painful as the material world is, it's what we know, right? It's comfort. We have comfort in what we know. And as we start to loosen those strings of attachment, we're entering unknown territory from our intellectual and mind perspective. The soul knows who we are, the true identity knows that this is actually what we want. So the soul is in there going, oh my God, I want to chant. And the mind is like, oh no, we can't do that. That's scary, right? Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just had this thought that I thought was worth sharing, that living in the material world is like living in an abusive relationship. that a lot of people, they stay in abusive relationships, living with the person, because it's what they know. It's familiar. It's their comfort zone, even though it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Even though it's painful and horrible. But they don't leave because they're afraid that what will I do? Where will I go? Who will I be with? So it's kind of the same thing, that we're in the material world and we're just getting kicked here and there by the illusory energy. But we're familiar, so we just stick with it, and we try to see the bright side, and we try to hear about people who have worse problems than us, so that we feel like our problems are not so bad, and it's tolerable. But we could easily just leave. We don't have. It's like you can just leave an abusive relationship. You can find somebody nice. You can be alone and peaceful. But people stay. So in the same way, we can also get out of this, suffering of material life, and just take shelter of Krishna and be peaceful and happy and inspired.
Yeah, it's true. It is. It's very much an abusive relationship, and like an abusive relationship, at some level, we also believe that we deserve it, and that we don't deserve anything better, right? And that's where the mercy comes in, because mercy is given whether or not we deserve it or not. Mercy is just freely given. And that's why it's one of the pillars of religious life, of spiritual life, right? It's one of the 4 pillars that we really try to concentrate on: mercy, austerity, cleanliness, truthfulness. And therefore we take these vows that help us understand these 4 pillars and embrace these 4 pillars. And mercy, if we want mercy, there's a saying that if you want anything, you have to give that thing, right? So if we want mercy, we have to understand how to give mercy, and that really pulls in our own compassion and empathy. But we learn how to give mercy and even receive mercy through association. So it all comes back through association. Even in a abusive relationship, sometimes the woman is not able to escape on her own. Sometimes the husband or man can be very violent if she tries to leave. And so she needs the help, the mercy of people, right? They have women's shelters that will protect her, that will hide her identity, that you can't just go to a women's shelter and ask, oh, is so-and-so here? Because that's, that would violate her protection. So it's the same way that when we are wanting to leave this abusive relationship, the spiritual world, that we need the kindness and mercy of devotees to do so. So we're very fortunate here in Dallas because we have such a wonderful temple community. We have such wonderful devotees that are very merciful, right? They're very kind. Sometimes, though, it's hard to see it. Sometimes when you get to know someone, that familiarity, you start to see all the other things. You think about the flaws, the faults. And so really, if we keep this in mind, that everyone that comes, whether it's their first day or their 100th day or 1,000th day, that everyone has got this level of love and devotion for Krishna and his devotees, and everything is centered around that, then even, the faults we can overlook, right? Even in a healthy relationship, partners have to tolerate some sort of, I'm sure you guys have some stories. It's like we always have to tolerate, because none of us are, there is no perfection, right? There's just, the levels of how much of our good highest self that we're tapping into versus our shadow selves. And as we're on this path, of progression, there's so many things that can bring out our shadow selves. And so, no one experiences that more than our partners or family. Yes.
It's easy to love somebody you love, but to love somebody you hate, that's what's hard.
It's true.
It's easy to go the simple path, but it's hard to walk the hard path. And going through these troubles, Krishna knows this. And to love somebody you hate, that's something we should be all trying to do. Sometimes we don't want to do those things because they're not of our own, or there's something, they're strangers. But in all reality, Krishna loves them just as much as you.
Yeah, it's true. Great point. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I was thinking when you said that it's actually been really hard to hate someone who hates, or love someone who hates you, right? And so, that's extreme tolerance. And sometimes that hate is based on, like we talked about last week, identity, this material body identity that we are living in. We identify so acutely of it, but we also experience life through that body. So as a female of Indian descent, of a certain age, there's just way that people will treat me. And then sometimes that can bring up irritation, and you're like, oh. But at the same time, it's that learning that tolerance, right? And we do that with the strength of our strong relationships, right? If we have people that are telling us that, oh, you are Krishna's servant, then when something happens, we have that whispered in our ear. We can hear that as the voice in our heads, right? Rather than the hateful voices that can sometimes hurt, right? And sometimes those voices are the ones that repeat in our brains. And so we want to replace it. And we do that by having those strong associations. So what's been your experience with associating with?
About giving thanks. You have a lot more thanks whenever you go through those hard times. You're so much more comforted.
Yes.
And associating with all different parts of the body that comes in here. Like, people can teach you things that you don't know. And that's what Krishna blessed them that way. So you gotta wrap your head around the ear is not better than the eyes are not better than the mouth. Everyone is blessed in their own individual way.
Mm-hmm.
But to have the greater thanks in loving all those people that had slandered you, or all those people that had kicked you down, to love them and to go 20 miles with them, and to rather choose them over somebody you really love. That's my goals. That has been my goals, and to achieve that greater thanks, that greater love, the unconditional love, what Krishna really is, and the mercy. And I think there's no greater love than that. So at the end of the day, I think you have more thanks and more appreciation in God going the harder path than somebody who just went to the easier path. So.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. Yes, it definitely it gives us a whole new perspective on the challenges that we go through. And one of the things that we try to do is seeing every challenge as a gift from Krishna, because it does bring us closer, right? If everything was great, then we wouldn't seek something better. And, that's one of the reasons why things are so difficult in the material world. The other is we make it difficult for each other. That's pretty much the main reason. But really, what happens is that part of that difficulty is to help us understand that we're not this body. We're spirit souls. One of the stories that comes to mind, I've shared it previously, but I'll share it because it's relevant here, is during the snowpocalypse of 2021. I don't know if you were in Texas at that time. It was really cold, and then the power with Ted Cruz, the power was out for 3 days, and I do not like cold. I mean, it's just, I'm Indian descent, live in Texas. I'm okay with the heat, right? And so it was so cold. And at one point, I just remember feeling so miserable. And, even text messages or sending messages were few and far between, because I think when the power was out, the towers were out too. And then we would get the power cut back on for a half an hour, and I'd get all these messages. And I had a message from Rasatvija Swami that was just he was going through the same things that we were, because, you know, he was here in Dallas at the time. And he was just like sending this message out to make sure that we were okay. And it was like, wow, you know. And then I would get these messages like, you know, from different devotees like, hey, we have power. Who wants to come over? You know, warm up, charge your phones, whatever. And like these messages would pop up because different people had power at different times. And I was just thinking, wow, what a wonderful community to be a part of. Like, I don't think I would have survived those 3 days without that strength that I received from the devotees, and how, you know, like some were so really just stalwart and strong. And my neighbor across the street actually came over at one point because I had called him like crying, like, oh my God, the water is flooding and there's no electricity, I'm cold. And, you know, he like kind of came over just to kind of console me. Again, it's like, wow, devotees are just amazing people. You know, he's suffering the same thing, right? And he came just to like make sure that my pipes weren't gonna like burst, because there's like it started leaking in my kitchen. So it's like, yeah, Krishna provides everything that we need at every moment, as long as we ask for it and we're open to it and we're receiving that mercy. So it comes back to how much mercy can we actually receive, right? And that associating with each other and having that gratitude for each other just increases our capacity to receive more and more mercy. So I'll stop here and see if there's any questions, comments, thoughts, realizations.
Hare Krishna. I had a thought too, and you were saying that some people think that they don't deserve happiness, and it reminded me of, this is also linked to mercy, like receiving the mercy of a devotee. Yeah, it reminded me of Lord Rishabhadev when he's speaking to his sons. He says that famous verse, Nayam deha deha bhajam riloke, kashtan kamam arhate vidbhujamye. So he says like that you have this human form of life. Basically, you took a birth in a human body. You're not meant for the lower pleasures, the same pleasures that the animals experience, you know, from eating, sleeping, sex, defending yourself. You're meant for you deserve a higher pleasure. So the word is, the word arhate in that verse, it literally means deserve. He said you deserve more than this. And you can access that pleasure by performing devotional service. Tapo divyam putrika yena sadvam shudyad tasmad brahma sokyam tvanantam. He says that by devotional service, by taking a little bit of trouble, by foregoing some of your material pleasures, which are the lower pleasures that the animals have, by kind of foregoing those and doing a little austerity, taking some hardship to practice spiritual life, then you can come to a higher level, Shuddha Sattva. You can come to a level of purity in your life in which the Lord actually manifests, you know, and that by coming in contact with the Lord, then you get a pleasure which is Brahma Sokyam, which is spiritual pleasure, which is Tvanantam, which is eternal, which goes on forever. It's not like material pleasures that are just, yeah, you get a little, you know, buzz, a little thrill, and then it's gone, you know, next moment, after an hour or so, you know, they come and go. But spiritual pleasure just keeps coming, you know, it just goes on increasing because it's unlimited, and it's coming from Krishna, it's coming from God, and He's unlimited and He's eternal, so the pleasure that comes from Him is also unlimited and eternal. It's like, this is what you're meant to be experiencing. Yes. Forget about that other stuff.
Yes.
So it's like you deserve this kind of pleasure. So I just, when you said some people think they don't deserve it, I thought that was Lord Rishabhadev's mercy to tell them, to inform them that there's something better. You should go for the better thing.
Yes.
Just get out of the, you know, get out of the suffering situation. You deserve more.
Yes. Yeah, it's a fine line because we have this idea of, you know, we often confuse humility with self-deprecation, right? Like, low self-esteem, right? And someone who's humble doesn't have low self-esteem, right? They understand who they are, and through that, they realize that everything is connected to Krishna. But we have this idea of being, our mind and our body that comes with having some sort of low self-esteem, where we don't think we deserve Krishna's mercy, or we don't think we deserve the good things, the better, the higher taste. And again, that's one of the things that we have to work on, right? We have to understand that as pure spirit souls, as Krishna's devotees, we are worthy, right? We deserve, and it's not from a place of bragging or lack of humility, it's understanding our connection and tapping into that rather than the material idea, that we have of, I'm such a bad person, I'm such a flawed person, and I do bad things or don't do things that are necessarily in line with what with my goals, or I'm weak. Whatever it is that we have thoughts of ourselves can lead us to think that we don't deserve the mercy. But that's the beauty of mercy. It doesn't have to be earned. It doesn't have to be deserved. And we get it because getting it makes us deserving. And, and by, just being open to receiving it fills us up with so much more, like you're saying, that higher taste, that higher sweetness that you cannot find in the material world. And once you have that taste, it's like we want that more and more. And so we make ourselves more and more available to it. And all it takes is just turning to Krishna and saying, I'm yours. What is it that you want from me? How can I serve you, right? Or even just asking, there's got to be something better in this world. There's got to be something more in this world. And, in that moment, we turn our heads towards Krishna because we've turned away from him for so long. And he just pours the mercy into us, right? And so we just really have to work on being able to receive it. And whatever we need to do. Association is huge in that because we're social creatures. The soul, even if we're introverts or hermits, the soul thrives with association with other living beings. So
when you have hard times alone, it's a lot harder to lift yourself up. But when you're with your loved ones, they lift you up when you're down. And sometimes you'll be weak in the spirit and you'll be down and they're up. Or sometimes when you're up, they're down, and then you lift each other up. So I feel like that would help with having association with one another, is that we're here to lift each other up.
I think there's a saying, something like friends and family double the pleasure and half the pain, right? So if you have something that's really good, celebrating increases the pleasure. But if you're suffering, if you share, that decreases the pain. There's some sort of saying, I can't remember the quote right now, but yeah, thank you for sharing. Are there any other questions, thoughts, realizations? So I will, did you have something?
I was just thinking about association, and I was thinking about just how sweet it is that Krishna, in all of his pastimes, he's always surrounded by people. He's always surrounded by friends and family and finding ways to serve, and how probably if I were God, I would just be on a floating couch in the sky, relaxing, eating grapes. But Krishna really relishes these personal relationships, and just listening to this, I was thinking about how we can taste that same sweetness through association with devotees. Krishna sets that example for us.
Yes, thank you. I've heard it said that, You'll never find a depiction of Krishna alone. At the very least, he's with a cow, and at the most, you'll see him surrounded by all his friends. But he's never, ever depicted alone.
I was thinking you can compare it to like parents and children. So the parents, they want their children to be happy. And so if the children grow up and they become, teenagers and they start, kind of like hanging out with the wrong crowd, then the parents become very concerned, because they know that that's not going to have a good end, because whoever you associate, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are.
Right.
Even if you don't think it will happen. You'll start doing the things they do, having the qualities that they have. So, so Krishna, he's the Father, God, Father Almighty, Krishna is the Father of all beings. And so he really cares about us and he wants us to be happy. And, so he understands the importance of good association. So if somebody is if there's a soul who's interested in becoming God conscious, interested in being more spiritual, then he will lead them to the association of devotees so that they can connect, so that they can get the support and inspiration that they need to be enthusiastic to continue the practice of bhakti. And he wants us to be happy. We shouldn't feel like we don't have a right to be happy. We're meant to be happy. That's what we are, because we're souls, we're eternal souls, Satchidananda. Our nature is happiness.
Yes.
That we're eternal, we're full of knowledge, and we're full of bliss. It's just a question of uncovering that, by the mercy of association with devotees and association with Krishna in the form of his holy name, the deity, all the processes of bhakti that connect us with him.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing. So I'll stop here. I'll give you your assignment for, I guess, the next week. It's so we talked about initially, how do we make sure what we're doing is in line with our goals, right? So we can, kind of take stock and see what things we're willing to tweak, what habits maybe we have that we're willing to tweak at this time. Don't do all of it, because that's too much for the mind. But, maybe one or two things that you can do a little bit differently so that you can think about Krishna a little bit more. And then, of course, our friends are our accountability partners, right? So association comes in. If you turn to your friend and you say, I really want to stop or watch less TV. Let's set up a system where, when I want to watch TV, I call you instead, right? Or something like that, right? So it's like we can use each other to help us with our goals of achieving Krishna consciousness, right? So, all right. Tarantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.